Hello everyone! Welcome to the first episode of Diet Dray, a zero-calorie show that focuses on a variety of retro RPGs and RPG Maker creations. What do I mean by zero-calorie? Well, have you ever found yourself watching a Let's Play of an RPG and found yourself thinking, do we really need to see this battle again? You already did this fight a dozen times. Or how about, push the boulder over there! No, you're doing it wrong! Gosh dang it, listen to me when I'm yelling at my screen. Or maybe even, so you're telling me after all that you just went and died? What a waste of my time. Why can't you be perfect at video games like I am? Yeah, don't worry, there'll be none of that here. Think of Diet Dray as a Let's Play light. Instead of forcing you to watch every second of these RPGs, I'm basically just going to give you the cliff notes. Kinda like a review, but much more in depth. For instance, over the next few episodes, I am going to be covering Gobli, which is the sample game that was included with RPG Maker on the PlayStation 1. But before I tell you about Gobli, I feel that I should first tell you about RPG Maker itself, because context is important. So, RPG Maker, or RPG Sakura 3 in Japan, is part of a franchise currently owned by Enterbrain and formerly ASCII. And this franchise is massive, currently spanning over 24 games, not including spin-offs, though at the time of this recording, only 10 of these have been released outside Japan, plus a few of those spin-offs. While localization of these games have primarily been handled by NIS America and Degica, the RPG Makers released on the PlayStation 1 and 2 were handled by Agetec, a company that not only localized the odd game here and there, but also helped bring us the Armored Core franchise. As the name implies, RPG Maker is a creation tool that lets you create RPGs. Although I've seen other types of games made with this thing as well, like checkers, farm simulators, and even platformers. Okay, admittedly, your options are kinda limited with something called RPG Maker, but with a little bit of creativity, you can create some rather interesting games. What really makes RPG Maker so great, though, is how easy it is to use. Normally when you program a game, it looks like this, line after line of handwritten code, much of which is so cryptic you need the translation guide to understand it. Like seriously, what the heck is count supposed to mean? Don't answer that, it's a rhetorical question. In RPG Maker, though, programming is as simple as selecting from a list of predefined commands, filling in a few parameters, and there you go, you just created a shop in a matter of seconds. And not only does RPG Maker come with a convenient event editor, but it comes with an entire database with which you can create the building blocks of your game. It even includes an assortment of graphics built in, so if you're not an artist, don't worry, RPG Maker's got you covered. But if you are an artist, RPG Maker's got you covered there too. For you see, included with RPG Maker is Anime Maker, a tool that lets you create your own sprites, monsters, and title screens. Of course, trying to make art with a PlayStation controller is rather awkward, but thankfully Anime Maker is compatible with the PlayStation mouse, if you can find one. Anime Maker also includes the ability to create animated skits. I created this skit here for a video years ago. I like how it turned out, though the skit editor is kinda difficult to use, and you can't even use these in your game, so whether the skit editor is worth using is up to you. If you're really interested, I'll cover this in more detail later, along with the rest of RPG Maker's features. As for music, RPG Maker has 35 tracks included on the disc, and if you want to make custom music, well, I'm sorry to say that you're out of luck. RPG Sakura 3 was compatible with a music creation tool called Angaku Sakura Kanaderu 2, but when Agetec brought over RPG Sakura 3, the music maker was left behind and the functionality was removed. So that's the basics of RPG Maker. Now let's move on to Gobli. This game was created to show off some of RPG Maker's capabilities. How does it do? Well, let's find out. Our story begins with a group of heroes on a quest to acquire some medicine for a sick child. Immediately upon entering the forest, they are ambushed by some goblins. It is here that we are given a taste of RPG Maker's battle system. I say a taste because this battle is automatic, you have no control over it, but we can still learn a couple of things about it. For starters, it's a first-person battle system with up to 4 party members on your team. Another thing is that the battles don't take place on a separate screen. Rather, the screen simply dims a little and the battle takes place on that screen. It's not very pretty, but hey, no load times. After defeating the goblins, the heroes continue their quest for the medicine. As they leave though, the goblins they defeated are respawned. And it is here that we find out that the story is not following the heroes, but this goblin right here. This is Gobli, a goblin in the RPG world. In this world, monsters are called weaklings, and as a weakling, it is Gobli's job to fight the heroes solely for the sake of getting killed and giving the heroes experience and money. Yes, that really is his job. I can only imagine the life insurance rates. As you'd expect though, Gobli is tired of living the mundane life of a weakling. He wants to be a boss and kick heroic butt. Insert title screen with pigs on it. The next morning, Gobli is awoken by a phone call from the creator of this world, the programmer. It seems that the slimes at Common Plain have gotten sick, and the creator wants Gobli to help fill in for the slimes when the heroes arrive. A slime named Slimer will provide instructions when he gets there. By the way, the fact that Gobli received a phone call from the creator is actually kinda pretty awesome when you think about it. Now then, with the opening out of the way, we finally get control of the game. Welcome to Weakling Town. As the name suggests, you will find many different weaklings here, including another weakling who wants to become a boss. But this game isn't called Mummy, it's called Gobli, so he's not important. This being a town in an RPG, you can also find an inn, an equipment shop, and the job exchange service. The job exchange is where you can change job classes, though you have to be at a certain level to unlock these. Huh, look at that. Apparently you can be a cat. I guess even weaklings can be furries. As for the equipment shop, holy cow, look at those prices! Now don't worry, the game doesn't expect you to grind that much. This just happens to be the shop where you find most of Gobli's equipment, and you'll be returning to Weakling Town to upgrade your equipment on a few occasions. Unfortunately, this town is a little out of the way, so if I were you, I'd write down the price of these equipment so you know when you have enough money to make the trip worth it. Anyway, seeing as I can't afford even the cheapest equipment, I instead head over to the inn and buy myself a couple of red berries, which each heal 20 HP. And with that, it's onward to the world map. As you can see, RPG Maker's world maps use a point-and-click interface. The world map is also where you save the game. I know this map doesn't look like much, especially with that black border, but don't worry, this is just the underworld. The overworld has a bit more going for it. And in order to reach the overworld, we must first trek up the nearby tower. There's nothing special about this place, it's just used as a transition between the lower world and the upper world. Upon reaching the top of the tower, we find ourselves in the forest, push aside a boulder, and now the game truly begins. We got random encounters! Apparently, despite being a weakling yourself, these weaklings have no problem fighting you in preparation for the heroes. Now there isn't much you can do in battle yet. Gobli has a couple of spells, but not enough magic points to use them yet. So I'll withhold explaining the battle system until we get our second party member. But I will at least tell you what you're up against. We got ourselves some forest fairies and some imps. Wait, forest fairies? Aren't these the same monsters that the heroes fought against? No, I guess those were a different color. In any case, these things are definitely goblins at heart, because these guys are pretty tough at level 1, especially compared to the imps. Those guys never even touched me. I was pretty unlucky to hit a group of 3 fairies in my first battle. I had to heal just to survive that fight. In fact, by the time I finished exploring the forest, I had used up my other berry as well, and nearly died. It's not like these guys do anything special either, they just use regular attacks and that's it. I tried running away, but as is typical with these sort of games, that's easier said than done, and you get penalized when you fail. Come to think of it, aren't these guys supposed to lose against the heroes? If they're trying to practice for the heroes, why are they trying so hard to win? If they're practicing how to lose, they're not doing a very good job. By the way, while exploring the forest, I found a forest leaf. This raises your max HP by 1 point. It doesn't sound like much, but trust me, you'll be finding a bunch of these during the adventure. That said, I recommend saving them for a certain character later on. I also reached level 2 along the way and learned a sleep spell. I'll tell you how it works later. Now then, immediately upon leaving the forest, I enter the town of Common Town. In this town, we learn that weaklings aren't the only characters who are aware of their roles in this RPG world. One character even complains about how his only line of dialogue is, "This is Common Town," which makes me wonder, are the heroes aware of the show that's being put on for them, or do they think this is all real? Anyway, we're being plot blocked by a broken bridge, so let's explore. We got an inn, which I was all too happy to use, and we got a shop. Inside the shop is a boy selling shields. Don't bother buying them, they are weak and you can get something much better. The actual shopkeeper sells more berries, as well as some darts and robes, which Gobli can't equip. And just like the shop of the underworld, the equipment here seems to be very expensive. Finally, we find ourselves inside a shed with a monkey in it. Enjoy the monkey while you can though, because it almost immediately leaps through a hole in the wall. And then the hole in the wall starts talking to you. And then the hole in the wall gets off the wall. Okay. So have you ever seen one of those cartoons where a character places a hole on the ground and it actually functions as a hole? Now imagine if one of those holes came to life. This is Mark, and he has been told by the creator to guide Gobli to Slimer at Cape Common. He's also the character that will be equipping all those darts and robes from before. Being that Mark's role in life is to be a literal hole in the wall, he knows very little about the outside world and is excited to see what it's like. Which makes me wonder, why did the creator choose him to be a guide? Couldn't the creator have chosen someone more knowledgeable about the outside world? What about that guy? He's got no dialogue in this game at all. In fact, as soon as Mark joins your team, the bridge is fixed and that guy is nowhere to be found. There is a talking horse though. Well, whatever. With the bridge fixed, we finally gain access to the overworld map. It's still not a very big map, but it's nicer looking. It's got this old papery look to it. So, our next destination is nearby, Common Plain. Finding the 6 slimes is as easy as following the stream north and crossing the bridge. But Common Plain has a lot more explorable area than this, so I decided to explore for treasure. Turns out there weren't any. But there were random encounters, and now that we got a second party member, it is time to explain the battle system. Obviously, it's a turn-based battle system. You put in your team's commands and watch everyone's turns play out. Sometimes a battle begins with either a first attack or an ambush. These pretty much work like you would expect them to. If you get the first attack, your team starts with a free turn, and running away on that turn is guaranteed. If you get ambushed, the enemies start with a free turn. Next, there's the auto command, which lets the game fight the battle for you until you cancel out. This is handy if you want to get through fights more quickly. The AI will target the weakest enemies first, taking advantage of any weaknesses they might have. It'll even heal you if your health starts getting low, although it sometimes gets a little confused about using items. Plus, in an effort to defeat the enemies quickly, the AI will eat through your MP like no tomorrow. Thankfully, the battle system also provides a plan feature. You can use this to tell the AI what it can and can't do during battle. Now let's talk about magic. From the start, both Gobli and Mark have an attack and healing spell. And Gobli should also have a sleep spell by the time you enter Common Plain. Mark's spells will be especially useful throughout the game, as many of them can target enemy groups, meaning if there's any identical enemies standing next to each other, the spell targets each of them. You'll also notice an equip option and a special attack option. Both of these options are related to magic, but these aren't available yet, so I'll explain these when the time comes. But I do want to point out how you have a stat called Magic Defense. Now, fair warning, I'm about to get into some technical stuff, but believe it or not, there are still people who use this RPG Maker, and so I feel this stat is important to discuss. What's important about it? Magic Defense is a lie. Despite its name, it has nothing to do with how much damage you take from magic. Instead, it affects resistance to status afflictions. You see, RPG Maker has 10 of these, each with a default accuracy. Magic Defense reduces each of these accuracies by a certain percentage. For example, a Magic Defense of 2500 would reduce these by 25%, and a Magic Defense of 5000 would reduce these by 50%. Yes, Magic Defense has to be that high to have an effect, and apparently the people who created RPG Maker's sample game did not get the memo. The highest Magic Defense an enemy in this game has is 20. That's only a 0.2% resistance. And yes, that means that even the final boss can be afflicted by status effects. Though, at the very least, Petrify and Instant Death only work against random encounters, meaning they don't work against bosses. And would you believe I only just learned that? I've owned RPG Maker since 2002, and I always assumed that if I wanted a boss to be immune to instant death, it had to be immune to everything. So that's RPG Maker's battle system, or at least the basics. By the time we reach the end of this game, you won't believe what Gobli and Mark will be capable of. But that's for later. For now, let's go over the enemies in Common Plain. The Forest Fairies make a return, along with their recolors, the Plain Fairies, which look an awful lot like Gobli. Are we sure that Gobli is really a goblin? Also, we got bats, because every RPG needs bats. Though I'll give them this, at least we're not fighting them in a cave. Now the bats overall are not much of a concern. They go down in one hit, and they will sometimes try to run. Ha! Even enemies have trouble running in this RPG. Once again, though, it's the fairies that you have to be concerned about. They tend to hit hard, especially against Mark, who obviously has no battle experience. In fact, I had a bit of bad luck with Mark. He wound up getting KO'd by a critical hit. Twice! Unfortunately, you aren't given a way to revive party members until later on in the game, and as you'd expect, if a character is dead at the end of battle, they don't gain any experience points. Man, I hate that. Though at the very least, characters do automatically get revived after battle, with 1 HP. On the bright side, some of the enemies were dropping forest leaves. Yeah, you know, that item that permanently boosts your max HP? They're apparently a drop from random encounters. That said, I still don't want to use them yet, and seeing as I was taking a bit of a beating, I decided to head back to Common Town to heal up before moving on. Cause not only did I find some forest leaves, but I also gained a few levels while exploring, and I did not want to lose that progress if I died. While I was at it, I decided to buy a Shadow Robe for Mark. The Shadow Robe has a defense of 10, which means it'll reduce damage by 5. That's basically how damage is calculated, by the way. Cut your attack stat in half, that's how much damage you'll cause. Cut your defense stat in half, that's how much damage is reduced. Sure would be nice if all RPGs were that simple. Oh, and as for magic spells, they work a little differently, but that's another thing that'll have to be explained later. Anyway, now that I restocked my items and boosted Mark's defense, it's time to make our way to Slimer at Cape Common. Along the way, we come across the 6 slimes, who I guess are all living inside a well. Yeesh, it's no wonder they all have colds. Mark also learned a spell called Query. This spell allows Mark to find out how much HP an enemy has. And that's all it can do. It doesn't tell you if the enemy is weak to magic, and it doesn't work at all against bosses, so not a very useful spell. Eventually, we finally make it to Cape Common, where we find Slimer, along with his friend, Slimy. Those are real creative names there, guys. Makes me wonder what the other slimes are named. I'm gonna guess Slimeball, Slimeisha, Slime, and Politician. So, now we're ready to help the slimes out. But before telling Gobli what he needs to do, Slimer and Slimy question the creator's decision to bring Gobli to help and decide to test Gobli's strength in battle. Because of course they do. And so begins the first boss battle. Huh. Not much of a boss fight, is it? It's not even using boss music. Well, this isn't working out. Let's just cast a couple of spells, and there we go, Battle 1. Now that Gobli has proven himself, even though he had help from Mark, Slimer assigns Gobli to something called a range of movement, instructing him not to attack the heroes unless they come within that range. This is because if every monster in the area attacked the heroes at once, the heroes wouldn't stand a chance. As weaklings, it is their goal to ensure the heroes have a good time while exploring the world. Your mileage may vary. Mark, being a character who is supposed to stay in place, is rather excited about the prospect of having a range of movement, and wants one for himself. To appease to Mark, Slimer tells him of other characters that have no movement and yet take pride in their positions. Those characters are the castle guards. Slimer suggests that if Mark wants to learn more about that pride, he should go see a retired castle guard who lives nearby. Mark takes Slimer's advice, but insists that Gobli come along with him. And I do mean insist. You're given the option to refuse, but thou must. And so, Gobli leaves his post to bring Mark to the soldier's home. You know, maybe Slimer was right to question the creator's decision. The creator's not gonna be happy about this. And that is the end of the first episode of Diet Dray. Now that the first episode is over, allow me to properly introduce myself. My name is Draygone Llewellyn Fuzzbottom Jr., and I am a raccoon dragon, as far as you know. So, how did you guys like my video? I put a lot of work into it, so I'm hoping it didn't suck. Since this is the first episode, I'm sure there's some things that could use some improvement, so if you have any suggestions, by all means, let me know in the comments below. And as long as you're still here, I'd like to give you some behind-the-scenes info about this episode. But before I do that, I've got some shoutouts that I need to give out. First, a shoutout to my patrons, Snow Kieran, Hiruru, Theo Vellum, and a special thanks to my special sponsor, Lit Dragon. By the way, I've got a link to my Patreon account in the description below. If you like this show enough, maybe you'd be interested in pledging for early access? I mean, I'm not begging for pledges, but I'm just gonna go ahead and move on now. Cause I also want to give a shout out to Gala98. Hopefully I said your name right. She's the one who drew this picture of me, and I gotta say, I really like how it turned out, especially my wings and feet. I've been waiting quite a while to be able to show you guys my complete self, even if I can't appear on camera. But that's another story. Now then, about the behind the scenes stuff. Oh boy, was this episode hard to make. Part of what made it difficult is that this is not the first version of the episode. In the first version, I tried giving an in-depth look at RPG Maker and planned on starting Gobli later. But there was so much to cover, the episode was getting too long. I'd like to try to keep this under a half hour if I'm able. We'll see how long I'm able to keep that up. So I decided instead to start with Gobli, and then when I do get to RPG Maker itself, I won't have to cover as much because a lot of its capabilities were already shown off in Gobli. That said, this episode still wound up being longer than I expected, but I shouldn't be surprised. Introducing new playthroughs is often a time-consuming task. But now that introductions are out of the way, I'll be able to dedicate more time towards making progress in the next episode. And let me tell you, time is something I definitely need. So expect Diet Dray to run on a bi-weekly schedule. If you want something to watch while waiting for the next episode, maybe you'd be interested in my Let's Play channel, which of course I link in the description. In a bit, I plan on starting a Let's Play of Pokemon Silver, preferably with a working battery. Also, just recently, I finished a playthrough of a Zelda ROM hack in which Link spends the entire game as a rabbit, with dialogue changes. And I'm currently playing through Shining Force. It is my first Let's Play of a tactical RPG, and because it's the first, it's a little rough around the edges, but maybe you'd like it.